For years, whispers circled the corridors of the monarchy about one mystery no one dared to confront. Why Queen Camilla refused to set foot in Sandringham, the estate that shaped royal traditions for generations. But when Camilla finally spoke, when her words cut through the silence like shattered glass, the truth didn't just surprise the family. It exposed something darker, deeper, and more personal than anyone imagined. And as her voice cracked, the entire room fell breathless. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What followed wasn't a rehearsed explanation or a carefully crafted palace statement. It was a confession torn from a place she had fought to hide for decades. A place so fragile that even speaking of it seemed to reopen wounds time had never managed to heal. She hadn't planned to reveal the secret that day. In fact, Camilla had spent years building walls around it, stacking silence on top of silence, until she convinced herself it no longer needed to be addressed. But something in the atmosphere shifted, perhaps the persistent questions from those who sensed her avoidance, or the weight of years pressing down like a storm ready to break. Whatever the reason, the moment she inhaled sharply and lifted her gaze, the tension around the table grew as thick as fog. Senior royals leaned forward with barely disguised apprehension, each silently bracing for an answer they weren't entirely sure they wanted to hear. Her hands trembled just slightly, a sign only the most observant could detect, but enough to betray the truth that what she was about to say came from a place of genuine pain. Charles watched her with a mixture of concern and resignation, as if he had long feared this moment would come. His eyes followed every movement, the tightening of her jaw, the hesitation before her words formed, the subtle flinch when someone mentioned Sandringham earlier. Camilla felt the weight of their expectations pressing down, and in that crushing silence, memories she had buried surged back with merciless clarity. It wasn't the estate itself that haunted her. It was what had happened there. The echoes of a moment she never fully escaped. The room seemed to contract around her, every face waiting, every breath suspended, and the memories she had avoided for so long clawed their way to the surface. She began cautiously, choosing words that seemed to hover between past and present. As she spoke, her voice wavered with a tenderness that unsettled even the most unemotional among them. She admitted it wasn't tradition, nor duty, nor any lingering resentment tied to royal history that kept her from Sandringham. It was something more intimate and far more damaging, a truth wrapped in fear, regret, and a shadow that had followed her quietly, even as she built a public image of strength. The confession struck the room like a silent thunderclap, and for a moment, no one reacted. They simply absorbed the weight of her admission, stunned by the rawness of what she'd finally allowed herself to reveal. But in her voice, there were hints, small, trembling clues, that what she shared wasn't the full story. Something deeper lingered behind her forced composure, something untouched and far more destructive than what she had just managed to articulate. A storm still waited beyond her words, gathering quietly, promising that the truth they had heard was merely the first crack in a much larger fracture she had kept hidden for years. But if Camilla's confession stunned the room, the story behind it, the one she had buried for decades, was even more devastating. Before Camilla entered the royal fold, before the world knew her name, there was an event so unsettling that those who witnessed it refused to ever speak of it again. An encounter at Sandringham that reshaped her life, scarred her memories, and forged a quiet terror she carried into the palace. And now, for the first time, the layers are peeling back, revealing a deeply personal history the royal institution desperately wanted buried. What Camilla revealed in that tense room wasn't born from a recent conflict or a sudden emotional shift. It reached back to a time when she was still navigating the complexities of aristocratic circles, long before fate intertwined her path with Charles. Her early visits to Sandringham were never meant to be anything more than social calls. Invitations extended to her through acquaintances who moved comfortably among the royals. Yet those visits planted the seeds of a fear she never managed to escape, no matter how tightly she tried to hold herself together. She had stepped onto the estate as a young woman, unaware of the eyes that followed her, unaware of the quiet judgment that lingered behind carefully polished smiles. What unsettled her was not the grandeur or the formality, but the presence of a senior royal figure whose demeanor changed the moment she arrived. Camilla would later describe it as a shift in the air, a sudden tension that made her feel as though she had crossed an invisible boundary she was never meant to approach. It wasn't a confrontation in the traditional sense, not something dramatic enough to spark gossip, but it was significant enough to leave her shaken. A single conversation, short, curt, and chilling in its undertone, left her with the haunting sense that she had been evaluated and dismissed in the same breath. And the worst part was the realization that someone else had witnessed the exchange, someone whose silence over the years grew more suspicious with every reflection she allowed herself to revisit. The emotional trauma of that moment didn't erupt immediately. Instead, it settled into her quietly, like a shadow that deepened over time. She learned to mask it behind composure, charm, and a confident exterior that fooled almost everyone. Even Charles, in the early years of their connection, never realized how deeply that experience at Sandringham had carved itself into her psyche. Each time the estate came up in conversation, each time an event was planned there, Camilla felt the old dread creeping back into her chest, though she hid it with practiced grace. The palace, eager to maintain an image of unity and stability, never addressed the whispers that occasionally resurfaced about that day. Instead, they buried them under layers of official statements, carefully curated public appearances, and strategic silence. But rumors have a way of clinging to the edges of truth when they're not fully extinguished. Those who knew fragments of the story never dared to question it openly, unsure whether it was a misunderstanding or something far more sinister. The unnamed witness, whose identity Camilla still refuses to reveal, chose loyalty or self-preservation over honesty, a choice that deepened her sense of isolation. And with each passing year, the memory played, like a quiet echo in her mind, resurfacing whenever Sandringham entered the conversation, a constant reminder of the moment she felt truly vulnerable. It was this memory, hidden beneath decades of silence, that formed the foundation of her refusal, long before the political tensions and personal rivalries that would later intensify the divide. Yet the past wasn't the only force that kept her away. Newer battles inside the royal household made Sandringham feel even more dangerous. Behind palace walls, Sandringham isn't just an estate, it's a proving ground. A place where alliances are forged, secrets are traded, and the monarchy's most delicate power shifts unfold. Camilla knew this better than anyone, and when she realized what was being plotted inside those walls, she walked away not out of fear, but out of fury. Because what she discovered wasn't just political maneuvering, it was personal. It was the dawning awareness that the quiet hostility she had once experienced at Sandringham had grown into something far more coordinated, something rooted not in tradition, but in strategy, designed to push her to the edge of the institution she had fought so hard to become part of. The estate had become a chessboard, and she, whether she wanted to or not, had become a piece in a game she hadn't agreed to play. Hidden factions had been growing within the royal household, subtle at first, almost impossible to detect, but unmistakable once Camilla began to observe them closely. They weren't openly rebellious, nor were they loud. They operated in whispers, in closed-door exchanges, in nods that communicated more than words ever could. These individuals believed the monarchy needed a different direction, one that didn't include Camilla's influence, and their preferred battleground was Sandringham, the estate where tradition offered cover for backroom agreements. Camilla sensed the shift long before anyone acknowledged it, noticing how invitations were phrased differently, how decisions were made without her input, and how certain faces carried an unspoken defiance when she entered a room. But everything changed, with one covert meeting she was never meant to know about. A gathering at Sandringham, exclusive, strategic, and deliberately conducted without her involvement, served as the turning point. What made it worse was not just her exclusion, but the knowledge that Charles had been pressured into attending. He hadn't wanted to go, yet duty, expectation, and the relentless weight of royal protocol forced him into that room. When Camilla learned of the meeting, she felt a flare of anger that took her by surprise. It wasn't jealousy or insecurity. It was the realization that people within the family were trying to strip away her voice, her presence, her legitimacy, and they were doing it in the very place that had already caused her so much hidden pain. The tension between Camilla and a senior royal figure, one whose authority still carried enormous influence, began to reach a breaking point. Subtle disagreements became pointed remarks, thinly veiled criticisms, and moments of cold dismissal that cut deeper than any public scandal ever could. This figure believed Camilla's growing role was weakening a tradition they had personally vowed to protect, and Sandringham became the center of their quiet campaign. Camilla felt the shift immediately, sensing the calculated distance, the strategic exclusion, and the insistence on decisions made without consultation. Yet what wounded her most was watching Charles being drawn into these struggles, his loyalty silently tested each time he was asked to attend another meeting she wasn't welcome in. Every gathering at Sandringham seemed to foreshadow something darker, a betrayal not yet spoken but already felt. The estate's traditions, once symbolic and ceremonial, took on a sharper edge, used to justify decisions that edged her out of some of the monarchy's most important discussions. The weight of those rituals became heavy, almost suffocating, as though the estate itself conspired to remind her she didn't belong. And when a private argument finally erupted, raw, emotional, and impossible to forget, Camilla reached a point she had never imagined she would face. The words exchanged that day, charged with years of unspoken resentment, convinced her the estate wasn't simply uncomfortable. It was unsafe emotionally, politically, and personally. From that moment, her refusal to return wasn't hesitation, it was resolve. She walked away with a vow she never voiced aloud but carried deep within her, that Sandringham would no longer serve as the place where she was diminished, dismissed, or blindsided by hidden agendas. That promise stayed with her, shaping every decision she made when the estate was mentioned. But what truly transformed her avoidance into a vow was something much deeper, something almost no one knew had ever happened. Behind palace walls, Sandringham isn't just an estate, it's a proving ground, a place where alliances are forged, secrets are traded, and the monarchy's most delicate power shifts unfold. Camilla knew this better than anyone, and when she realized what was being plotted inside those walls, she walked away, not out of fear, but out of fury. Because what she discovered wasn't just political maneuvering, it was personal. It was the dawning awareness that the quiet hostility she had once experienced at Sandringham had grown into something far more coordinated. Something rooted not in tradition, but in strategy, designed to push her to the edge of the institution she had fought so hard to become part of. The estate had become a chessboard, and she, whether she wanted to or not, had become a piece in a game she hadn't agreed to play. Hidden factions had been growing within the royal household, subtle at first, almost impossible to detect, but unmistakable once Camilla began to observe them closely. They weren't openly rebellious, nor were they loud. They operated in whispers, in closed-door exchanges, in nods that communicated more than words ever could. These individuals believed the monarchy needed a different direction, one that didn't include Camilla's influence, and their preferred battleground was Sandringham, the estate where tradition offered cover for backroom agreements. Camilla sensed the shift long before anyone acknowledged it, noticing how invitations were phrased differently, how decisions were made without her input, and how certain faces carried an unspoken defiance when she entered a room. But everything changed with one covert meeting she was never meant to know about. A gathering at Sandringham, exclusive, strategic, and deliberately conducted without her involvement, served as the turning point. What made it worse was not just her exclusion, but the knowledge that Charles had been pressured into attending. He hadn't wanted to go, yet duty, expectation, and the relentless weight of royal protocol forced him into that room. When Camilla learned of the meeting, she felt a flare of anger that took her by surprise. It wasn't jealousy or insecurity, it was the realization that people within the family were trying to strip away her voice, her presence, her legitimacy, and they were doing it in the very place that had already caused her so much hidden pain. The tension between Camilla and a senior royal figure, one whose authority still carried enormous influence, began to reach a breaking point. Subtle disagreements became pointed remarks, thinly veiled criticisms, and moments of cold dismissal that cut deeper than any public scandal ever could. This figure believed Camilla's growing role was weakening a tradition they had personally vowed to protect, and Sandringham became the center of their quiet campaign. Camilla felt the shift immediately, sensing the calculated distance, the strategic exclusion, and the insistence on decisions made without consultation. Yet what wounded her most was watching Charles being drawn into these struggles. His loyalty silently tested each time he was asked to attend another meeting she wasn't welcome in. Every gathering at Sandringham seemed to foreshadow something darker, a betrayal not yet spoken but already felt. The estate's traditions, once symbolic and ceremonial, took on a sharper edge, used to justify decisions that edged her out of some of the monarchy's most important discussions. The weight of those rituals became heavy, almost suffocating, as though the estate itself conspired to remind her she didn't belong. And when a private argument finally erupted raw, emotional, and impossible to forget, Camilla reached a point she had never imagined she would face. The words exchanged that day, charged with years of unspoken resentment, convinced her the estate wasn't simply uncomfortable. It was unsafe emotionally, politically, and personally. From that moment, her refusal to return wasn't hesitation, it was resolve. She walked away with a vow she never voiced aloud but carried deep within her, that Sandringham would no longer serve as the place where she was diminished, dismissed, or blindsided by hidden agendas. That promise stayed with her, shaping every decision she made when the estate was mentioned. But what truly transformed her avoidance into a vow was something much deeper, something almost no one knew had ever happened. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine family discussion, but the tension had been building for months. One pointed question, one raised eyebrow, and one accusation too sharp to ignore, and suddenly Camilla found herself cornered. Surrounded by those who doubted her, pressured by those who demanded answers, she realized her silence was no longer a shield. It was a trap, and as the room tightened around her, she felt every unresolved memory sharpening, every buried emotion rising, urging her to either confront the past or let it crush her completely. What began as a polite exchange quickly twisted into something far more volatile, pulling her into a confrontation she had spent decades trying to avoid. The spark came from a voice she had learned to anticipate, the royal who had always questioned her place, who masked hostility behind protocol, who believed Sandringham was a test she continually failed by refusing to attend. Their tone was deceptively calm, but the challenge beneath it was unmistakable as they asked why she consistently avoided the estate. It wasn't a request for clarity. It was a demand born from suspicion, one designed to expose her in front of those who already doubted her motives. The table fell silent as eyes shifted toward her, some curious, some wary, and a few clearly waiting for her to stumble. For a moment, Camilla felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the instinct to deflect, to protect herself with careful phrasing. But she could see that the room had already chosen its battleground. Charles stepped in immediately, trying to soften the question, trying to redirect the conversation before it spiraled, but his attempt only deepened the fracture. Every word he spoke was met with resistance, subtle interruptions that dismissed his efforts to shield her. The room's energy shifted in a way Camilla recognized all too well. The gathering had turned into an interrogation, and the one person who always tried to defend her was losing control of the moment. Watching him struggle to hold the conversation together struck her deeply, reopening wounds she had kept sealed for years. His strained expression reminded her of every time he had been pulled into conflicts she never wanted to involve him in, every moment when her silence forced him to stand alone. As the questioning continued, flashes of Sandringham surged through Camilla's mind, memories she thought she had buried. Finally breaking through the surface, she felt the coldness of that early encounter, the sting of exclusion, the weight of the covert meetings, and the unspoken hostility she had endured. Those memories struck her with such force that she momentarily froze, unable to find words as the past and present collided. She heard echoes of old conversations, fragments of warnings, and the lingering dread she had carried since her youth. The more she tried to steady her breathing, the more those flashbacks tightened their grip, making the room blur around her. The air thickened as people exchanged glances, sensing that something was shifting inside her. The energy became electric, charged with anticipation, curiosity, and an underlying hunger for the truth. They weren't simply asking anymore, they were waiting, waiting for her to break the silence that had shielded her for so long, waiting for a revelation that might confirm their suspicions or dismantle their assumptions entirely. With every second that passed, Camilla felt the pressure intensify, pressing her toward a choice she'd avoided for years. She could protect herself and remain silent, or she could finally speak and risk exposing everything she had worked to hide. And then, almost imperceptibly, she reached her breaking point. It wasn't anger that pushed her toward the truth. It was exhaustion. Exhaustion from carrying a burden alone. Exhaustion from being misunderstood, underestimated and dismissed. Exhaustion from seeing Charles torn between duty and loyalty because she refused to confront the ghosts that followed her. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She realized that silence no longer protected her, it suffocated her, and for the first time, she understood that answering the question wasn't surrender, it was reclaiming her voice. With the room hanging on the edge of her next breath, Camilla made the decision to reveal the truth. Not because she wanted to, but because there was no longer any other path forward. Every hidden memory, every suppressed feeling, every unanswered question in that room compelled her to speak a revelation years in the making, one powerful enough to shake the foundations of the monarchy itself. But the truth she delivered wasn't just personal, it was generational. When Camilla began to speak, the room went still. What she revealed wasn't a simple explanation. It was a secret tied to the monarchy's legacy, its fractures, and its darkest moments. A truth so heavy that even those who thought they knew every corner of royal history suddenly felt unsteady. This wasn't just why she avoided Sandringham. This was why the very mention of it made her tremble. And as her voice broke through the suffocating quiet, it was clear she wasn't confessing out of fear anymore. She was doing it because the weight she had carried alone had finally become unbearable, a silent burden that had shaped her every step inside the royal world. She began by exposing a chapter of royal history so deeply buried that even seasoned insiders had only heard faint echoes of it. This wasn't a scandal that had simply been forgotten. It had been deliberately locked away, sealed behind layers of tradition, reputation, and unspoken agreements. Camilla had become the unwilling keeper of that truth, bound to protect it not for her own sake, but because the monarchy insisted that some shadows must never see daylight. She explained how she had been pulled into the secret long before she joined the royal family officially, drawn into a moment that forced her to witness a breach in the monarchy's carefully maintained facade. It was a moment that tied her fate to Sandringham in ways she never anticipated, leaving her with knowledge that poisoned every memory of the estate. The shock came when she revealed who was involved, a figure long considered untouchable, someone whose name carried too much weight, too much reverence, too much influence to ever be questioned. That individual had made a decision at Sandringham, a decision that triggered a ripple effect of cover-ups, whispered threats, and strategic silences. Camilla had not simply been a bystander, she had been pulled directly into the aftermath, forced to hold a truth that could fracture the monarchy if ever spoken aloud. The revelation stunned the room into a deeper silence, the kind that only comes when everything one believes about power, loyalty, and legacy is suddenly rearranged. She explained how Sandringham wasn't just the location of that incident, it was the key to understanding it. The estate had been the setting, the sanctuary, and the shield behind which the truth was concealed. Every hallway there held traces of that memory for her. Every tradition reinforced the weight of what she knew. Sandringham became the symbol of a wound she had never been allowed to heal, a place tied not to comfort or celebration, but to obligation and fear. And because the monarchy depended on silence, Camilla had been forced to endure the emotional burden alone, growing adept at hiding her tension whenever the estate was mentioned, mastering a level of composure that people believed was confidence, but was actually survival. But she didn't stop there. She revealed the consequences that would erupt if the truth ever escaped the walls in which it had been trapped. It wasn't just reputations at stake, it was the stability of the institution itself. The monarchy had survived scandals, tragedies, and bitter internal wars, but this truth was different. It touched the core of their history, the integrity of decisions that shaped their public image, and the very structure of trust within the family. If this secret reached the public, it would not simply cause a momentary uproar. It would reopen wounds the monarchy had stitched shut with deliberate care, unraveling relationships and foundations they depended on. The reactions in the room ranged from disbelief to devastation. Some stared at her as though she had spoken an impossible truth. Others looked away, grappling with the realization that something so monumental had been hidden from them. The sense of betrayal was thick, but so was the weight of understanding. For the first time, they saw the real reason behind her trembling refusal to return to Sandringham. They saw the woman who had been carrying a secret meant for an institution, not a single individual. They saw the cost of silence etched into every word she spoke. Yet even after the truth was laid bare, one question remained: what would happen next? In the hours that followed, alliances shifted, loyalties fractured, and the monarchy found itself facing a decision that could reshape its future. And while Camilla stood by her truth, others scrambled to contain the fallout. Because once a secret escapes the walls of Sandringham, it can never be buried again. The family, shaken by the gravity of what they had heard, retreated into private conversations that grew, increasingly sharp and divided. Some spoke in hushed tones, processing the weight of the secret with genuine concern. Others whispered with unmistakable frustration, searching for someone to blame as if anger could undo the revelation now echoing through the palace walls. Behind closed doors, the reactions were immediate and emotionally charged. A handful of royals approached Camilla quietly, offering sympathy not out of obligation but out of a newfound understanding of the burden she had carried alone. They recognized the strength it took to reveal something so deeply tied to the monarchy's shadowed past. But not everyone shared that perspective. There were those who saw her confession as a destabilizing force, a spark she had thrown knowingly or not into a room filled with dry kindling. Their disappointment wasn't openly expressed, but the tension radiating from them was impossible to ignore. While some sought unity, others demanded containment, fearing that even a whisper of this truth leaking outward would trigger consequences they weren't prepared to confront. Charles, caught between duty and devotion, felt the clash of worlds pressing against him. The political consequences of Camilla's revelation were swift, complicated, and unforgiving. Advisors immediately circled him, urging him to act with extreme caution, warning that any misstep could expose the monarchy to a storm it might not survive. He listened to them, yet his thoughts remained tethered to Camilla, her voice trembling as she spoke, her courage, her exhaustion. He realized that for years he had underestimated the depth of her suffering, believing he understood the pain she carried without ever recognizing the full extent of it. Now he stood at the crossroads of leadership and love, knowing that whichever direction he chose would reshape the future of the crown. Inside the advisory rooms, panic simmered beneath a veneer of professionalism. Senior aides and strategists raced to build a moat and shield around the family, crafting statements that might never be used, anticipating questions that might never be asked, preparing for a crisis that had not yet reached the public but could erupt at any moment. Their desperation revealed the fragile foundation on which the monarchy stood, a truth they had long tried to deny. They knew that if even a fragment of Camilla's revelation escaped the palace, speculation would consume every media outlet, and the monarchy's carefully curated image would crack under the pressure of its own secrets. For Camilla, the emotional aftermath was heavier than she expected. She had prepared herself for judgment, for skepticism, for blame, but she hadn't prepared for the silence, the heavy, lingering quiet that followed her every move, as if the entire palace was holding its breath around her. The admission had freed her from the weight of secrecy, yet it burdened her with the responsibility of what came next. She knew her truth had shifted balance within the family, and although she felt a sliver of relief, it was quickly overshadowed by the fear of what her confession had unleashed. The monarchy had always survived storms, but this one felt different. This one felt personal, raw, and impossible to control. And as the hours stretched into days, a deeper realization settled over the palace like an approaching storm cloud. This revelation was not the end of anything. It was the beginning. Quiet conversations hinted at fractures that might soon widen. Advisors exchanged anxious glances, aware that if another secret emerged, or if someone chose to weaponize what they now knew, the monarchy could face a crisis unlike any it had encountered before. Even Camilla sensed it, a shift in destiny, a change in trajectory. A new chapter unfolding with uncertain consequences, and as the monarchy braces for the next blow, one thing becomes certain. The truth about Sandringham was only the beginning. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.